Hey everyone, welcome back. I want to preface this by saying I do not think Tenet Exec is an amazing weapon. In fact, it has several issues with it that makes it very problematic and difficult to use beyond just a normal melee, at which other weapons are quite competitive with it. In my eyes, Grand Prime still has better DPS due to its high status even though crit is lower. Paracesis also has better utility in certain situations, and we even have Zaws which have better dispositions than any of these weapons. But that's not what we're looking at today. I wanted to see if I could make the Heavy Slam good, and unfortunately there seems to be very few ways to do so. That said, you can definitely make it good enough, as seen here. It will destroy everything you normally see in Steel Path, but it does restrict options and is a bit clunky for endless endurance. Basically, we can make it good enough, but it takes a lot to get there, and there are better melee options if you're using this same setup. But if you love Tenet Exec that much, then follow closely. Today we're obviously featuring Saryn. Now, some of you may already know where this is going, but this video is more so for others that don't know. The idea for this video came from Arcaradiat. Arcaradiat? I don't know, I may have butchered your name. Sorry about that in advance. I mostly wrote off Tenet Exec myself and wasn't interested in another generic red crit melee with a dysfunctional passive. The passive on it still sucks, but the setup suggested by Arcaradiat was strong enough it managed to redeem Exec's shortcomings on its slam attack perk. Saryn has one of the most broken synergy setups for weapons in the game. The reason I don't usually feature her is that it is so broken that it is totally unnecessary in most loadouts, but for a weapon like Exec, which has a near infinite amount of limitations on its unique perk, this is where we are at today. So let's take a look at that Exec first. Now this may seem like a pretty weird build to you, but let's go over why it looks like this. We're focusing on the Heavy Slam today. This Heavy Slam is unaffected by, are you ready? Base damage melee mods, weapon damage mods, melee damage arcanes, weapon damage arcanes, elemental mods, status chance mods, critical chance mods, critical damage mods, flat crit sources of any kind, blood rush or gladiator set, weeping wounds, empowered blades, steel charge, most elemental augments, and range mods. Wow, that's quite a long list. Now, what is it affected by, you may ask? Slam damage mods, armor stripping, combo counter, heavy efficiency, combo duration, life strike, attack speed, and additional combo count chance. You'll see all of these mods are featured on the build. We're basically building for the most damage we can reasonably get with all of these limitations and then filling the rest up with quality of life. If you haven't noticed yet, we will be focusing on a 12x Heavy Slam build with Reflex Coil and Xenrix's Inner Might, so that we can really get that nuking power we're looking for. That said, it will still perform even without 12x, which you can swap for True Punishment and a max ranked Corrupt Charge if you so choose. The original build is just what I prefer, so let's get into it. Why Life Strike? Especially for Steel Path? Well, this is our big flex slot. When you slam with this weapon, it produces these shockwave projectiles that travel forwards. Every hit from that also counts as a heavy attack on the Heavy Slam, meaning with the outrageous DPS I showcased at the start and multiple hits, it will always keep your HP topped up. This is more so to protect you from elemental DOTs rather than actually saving you from dying and tanking enemy hits. That said, the Slam has so much range and ragdoll that it is its own CC to a certain extent. The only other mod really that you might want to consider is the Saxum set if you're playing in a team with armor strip so that you can use the AoE % HP based damage when you kill enemies. The normal Slam Shockwave hits also count into the combo counter, making it quite easy to get your combo up to 12x and even more so if you run True Punishment instead. Moving on, both regular and Heavy Slam are boosted by Seismic Wave, which is one of the few ways to boost our Slam damage. So this is here. Corrupt Charges to give you a higher damage floor of 2x, which lets you use it even if you lose combo. We lose a bit of combo duration, but that's only 2 seconds, and as you can see, the build we are running has 22.6 combo duration. This is partly because we're running secondary dexterity on our Epitaph primer, which the priming isn't necessary, but bringing this arcane is. Make sure to pick this up as it is cheap currently. You can get a max one for just 15 to 20 plat. At max rank, it gives an extra 7.5 second combo duration to your melee and lets you free up your aura slot or melee mod slot from running a combo duration mod. Now let's look at Exec again. Shattering Impact because the shockwaves hit multiple times and include impact damage, meaning you can simultaneously deal heavy damage while also armor stripping. You also have the option to armor strip the normal way with swings. This is what it allows it to scale into endless if you're choosing to do longer runs. It is a little bit clunky though, and is more so a band-aid than a proper armor strip option for endless scaling in my opinion, as Exec isn't a gunblade or warfan. Body count fills the slot that might otherwise be taken by quickening, but I am actually running Arcane Strike on this build and it's super easy to proc with all of these shockwaves, so there isn't really a reason to mod attack speed on the weapon itself. Reflex Coil is needed to hit 90% attack efficiency with Inner Might from Xeneric. Dispatch Overdrive will proc constantly from your main DPS heavy slams, so it's just a nice quality of life. Now you'll see I left Prime Smite for last. This is the most important mod on the entire build due to how our loadout is set up. Smites are actually mandatory on exec heavy slam setups. Why, you may ask? Because it triple dips for this build. When you use the heavy slam, the raw damage output is multiplied by the Bane. We are running Toxin Lash on Saryn. Toxin Lash will scale its damage off the heavy slam hit, which was already boosted by the Bane. This additional hit from Toxin Lash will then be multiplied again by the Bane. And finally, Toxin Lash has a guaranteed Toxin proc on hit, and this is where the big damage happens. The damage used to calculate the DOT comes from Toxin Lash, which was already boosted by the Bane twice. After this is calculated, the Toxin DOT itself will be boosted by the Bane again one final time. So the DOT size is 1.55 times 1.55 times 1.55 for a total of 3.72 times more damage purely because of this smite. But it doesn't end here. Let's look at Saryn. This is a weapon-focused Saryn rather than mass AoE damage from Spores and Miasma. For this reason, we have dumped efficiency and range and went for high duration and strength instead. As efficiency is tanked, we want as high duration as reasonably possible for better energy economy and avoid the annoyance of multicasting. Strength is through the roof, since this is where all the DPS comes from. I can't fit it on the builds, but I would strongly recommend running Prime Sure-Footed in the Excellence instead of Power Drift if you can fit it. The small strength loss is definitely worth the knockdown immunity. We have 337 strength on this build from Blind Rage, Transient Fortitude, Umbral Intensify, and also Augur Secrets alongside Power Drift. A Subsumed Roar has 101.1% damage multiplier at 337 strength. Now what some of you may not know is that damage buffs are not all created equal. Say, Vex Armor is a base damage buff, Eclipse is a final multiplicative damage buff, Shock Trooper and the like act like elemental mods, and Roar is no different. It is a final multiplicative damage buff, but it actually works like a Bane and falls in the same bin of multipliers as them as well. This means that on this setup, it triple dips just like the previously described Prime Smite on Tenet Exec. So now we have our 101% Roar added with our Primed Smite, meaning our Toxin DOT from Toxin Lash now does 2.561 times 2.561 times 2.561 damage, for a total of 16.8 times more damage. See how much of a damage increase this is? This is the reason why Bane types of buffs are so powerful. Eclipse would only have applied once, and at best would have only given a 500% damage increase, but only if I'm in the absolute brightest light. We're also casting Venom Dose, because while elementals don't scale into the raw damage of the heavy slam attack, it does scale into Toxin Lash's damage, which uses the heavy slam damage as a baseline. This is why 337 strength is important, because it buffs the crap out of all three abilities we're using to source our damage, and they all interact in a multiplicative manner with each other. Finally, we still have Molt to draw enemy fire. Molt doesn't last as long on Steel Path due to the incoming damage, but it still works in a pinch to let you get away if your shields drop. You can basically chain a Rolling Guard together with a Molt afterwards to extend your survivability. We don't need regenerative Molt either, because Exec itself has Life Strike on it and will refill you to max instantly on a heavy slam, which is better than regenerative Molt's health over time. The build has Prime Flow and Arcane Energize to get the most out of our energy orbs and make it easy to sustain the 45 efficiency setup. You're free to spam your 2 as much as you want with zero problems. Arcane Strike is on the build to source attack speed for Tenet Exec, so we don't have to waste a mod slot on the weapon for it. Narrow-minded alone is good enough for duration and offsets our range, which isn't needed on this loadout regardless. Power Drift is just a tiny bit of extra strength, and Brief Respite allows us to top back up our shields near instantly after Rolling Guard by just spamming Molt a few times. Basically, there's no reason you should be dying on this build with a massive AoE CC from Exec, Rolling Guard, Brief Respite with the instant cast Molt spam. You are free to bring Panzer or another companion on this build, but it really isn't necessary. You can also bring in Epitaph or Viral Primer if you so wish. Now it's time to test out the build. First, let's try the standard 150 Corrupted Heavy Gunners. They're weak to corrosive and decently tanky, but not that much. Keep in mind our weapon has raw IPS and innate heat. We get Toxin from Toxin Lash, but it doesn't combine with the heat, and there is no corrosive status to strip armor, and heat even rarely procs on the slam to start with. So we will have to cut through all of the armor to kill. Now, let's slam these enemies once. Without anything, it's just tickling, right? Well, now let's see the power of Saryn. I'm gonna cast my 3 abilities, Venom Dose, Toxin Lash, and Roar. Now I'll show you what this weapon can do with just a 2x heavy. And they're dead. The DOTs aren't massive, but keep in mind the Heavy Slam does scale with combo counters, so this alone was enough to kill them in 2 ticks with just 2x, and cutting through all of the armor itself. Now let's build up to 12x instead. With that 22.6 combo duration, you can build this with either the normal swings or normal slams, as the shockwaves do stack combo easily as well. Just keep in mind that it will launch enemies, so if you do slam this way, you're trading some more instant combo for them becoming harder to hit afterwards. Now I'm going to spawn them again, because we stripped some armor with Shattering Impact already. Then I come back, make sure all my buffs are up again, and then slam. Well, that DOT size is 4 to 5 times larger than their entire health pool. So yeah, basically they get deleted. And look at that combo counter. We only dropped from 220 to 198, and you can easily get that back up to 220. Even if you can't find an enemy, you could just heavy attack nothing to reset the duration. We will only drop to 178 or so, but hey, that's still 178 combo, and now it's gonna last another 22.6 seconds again. So once you get the combo up on this build, it's very easy to keep it there. Now what do you think happens if I bring an Epitaph Primer to apply Viral? Well, let's see what happens. I'll spawn them again. Now we shoot Epitaph and then slam. Well then, that raw damage killed some of them, but look at that 300 to 400k Toxin DOT. This is the full power of the weapon. While it isn't amazing and busted like the other Tenet weapons, it is possible to make it kill things. And the silver lining is how spammable the Heavy Slam is compared to Agendus or Grigori. It's multiple hits and massive AoE cone in front of you. Combining this with Shattering Impact will let it kill much higher than you expect, but I would not recommend bringing this into level cap, as it's kind of finicky to use, and having to slam multiple times to kill one group of enemies while armor stripping can start to get annoying. It is entirely up to you though, and the potential is there, but in my opinion, Exec still takes a solid backseat to Agendus and Grigori. Just for funsies, because of how high the damage was and making it difficult to test, let's try that 12x heavy again with Epitaph Primer, or Panzer if you want to take that on instead, but on Drake Armanic Bombards. These guys don't get ragdolled, and they're significantly tankier, but this does mean I have to change the Bane. Remember, the Bane is the most important mod on this build, and you cannot use Exec without it. Okay, so I prime them up, and then slam. And that's pretty satisfying, to be honest. Yeah, so for anything on Steel Path outside Endurance, this is basically going to always one-shot and instantly delete everything you face. So if you like using Saryn and you really want to make Tenet Exec work, this is it. It is still kind of a mess to use, and I'm hoping to fix the interactions on its heavy attacks, as Vitrica has a similar gimmick, but its Glass Wave actually takes base damage mods, elementals, aura mods, arcanes, blood rush, and weeping. So technically you could get significantly higher damage out of Vitrica, albeit with slightly clunkier gameplay. This also means that Tenet Exec is basically relegated to Saryn only if you want to make its slam shockwaves good. So what did you think of this interaction? Keep in mind, Venom Dose plus Toxin Lash and Roar and Viral Primers is one of the absolute strongest synergies in the entire game, and the weapon still only DOTs into several hundreds of thousands instead of tens of millions to billions. This is just one way to make it work, but unfortunately I think this might just be the best. Thanks again, Arcaradiat, for the idea. It definitely turned out pretty well, and honestly, I would have been much more surprised and sad if one of the strongest setups in the game still wasn't enough to redeem it. But this made it fun and usable, which is what matters to me. If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like, or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always, as soon as possible, like I've done with covering the Tempest Starry and the Sisters of Parvos updates. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. I'm also preparing to get you the new info first once more new war info drops. You don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and see you all next time.